The Young and the Restless spoilers. Monday spoilers. April 28, 2025. Audra Charles had always prided herself on being a woman of ambition, driven by an unyielding desire to succeed no matter the cost. When Victor Newman had approached her with an offer that seemed too good to be true, she had accepted without hesitation, knowing the kind of power and influence that came with working by his side. But now, as she carefully executed her plan to trap Kyle Abbott, she was beginning to feel the weight of the risks she was taking, not just for herself, but for those around her, particularly Nate Hastings. Audra's plan was simple in theory: use the reputation of Kyle Abbott to her advantage, manipulate the situation in such a way that would hurt him without him even realizing it. If she could destroy his credibility in Claire Newman's eyes, she would have leverage that would allow her to secure a startup business venture that would be free of the constraints of Newman Enterprises. Victor had made it clear he would fund the business in full, but first, Audra had to ensure that Claire saw Kyle for what he truly was: a man unworthy of her trust, a man with too many secrets to be in a relationship with her. It was a delicate game, one that Audra knew could have dangerous consequences if not handled carefully. She had already begun planting the seeds of doubt in Claire's mind, subtly suggesting that Kyle wasn't the man he appeared to be. But as she continued down this path, she didn't realize how much danger she was putting her own relationship with Nate in. Nate Hastings had already noticed the changes in Audra's behavior. He had known that she was working closely with Victor, but he hadn't been aware of the darker, more sinister aspects of her plan. As much as he trusted Audra, there was a part of him that couldn't help but feel uneasy. Nate was no stranger to the business world, and he had learned to be cautious when people, especially those as ambitious as Audra, became involved in questionable activities. He had overheard bits and pieces of conversations, seen the way Audra would smile whenever Victor's name came up, and noticed the distance between them growing. But what bothered him most was that she was keeping secrets from him, secrets he could feel were starting to erode the foundation of their relationship. Audra had promised Victor that she would handle the situation with Kyle and Claire, and she was determined to keep that promise. But with Nate growing suspicious, she found herself caught between two worlds, the one she had built with Victor and the one she had with Nate. She had never intended to hurt Nate, after all, he was someone she cared for deeply, but the stakes were high, and she had made a commitment to Victor that she couldn't back out of. What Audra didn't realize was that as her involvement with Victor deepened, so too did the web of lies and manipulation she was weaving, and it was only a matter of time before everything would come crashing down. As Audra continued her work, she couldn't help but think about Claire. The young woman's naivety and inexperience in relationships made her an easy target, but it also made Audra question the ethics of what she was doing. She knew Kyle was a powerful figure, someone who could manipulate situations for his own gain, but did that really make him unworthy of Claire's affection? Audra had to remind herself that this wasn't about Claire, it was about advancing her own career, about securing a future that was entirely under her control. Claire was merely a pawn in a much larger game, and Audra couldn't afford to get distracted by any feelings of guilt or remorse. Meanwhile, Kyle's relationship with Claire was growing more complicated. Recently, Kyle had confided in her, telling her that he knew she had feelings for Victor, but that he loved her despite it all. He had also made it clear how much he hated Victor and the damage he had caused to the Abbott family over the years. Kyle's words were heavy with emotion, and Claire couldn't help but feel torn. She cared for Kyle deeply, but she couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that he was hiding something from her. It was clear that Kyle's animosity toward Victor wasn't just about business, it was personal. Kyle had grown up in the shadow of Victor's power, and now he was determined to protect the Abbott family from the destruction Victor had caused. But was his anger toward Victor clouding his judgment when it came to Claire? Could he really be the man she needed him to be, or was he too entangled in his own vendettas to truly love her? Claire, for her part, was struggling with her own feelings of confusion. She had always been taught to distrust the Newmans, and yet here she was, developing feelings for Victor's son. She had been raised in the world of revenge and betrayal, with Jordan Howard's vendetta against the Newman family looming over her. But now, living with her Aunt Victoria in Genoa City, she had started to see things differently. She had begun to trust Kyle, and though she was still haunted by the past, she allowed herself to believe in a future that could be different. But Victor's influence over her was undeniable. He had replaced Jordan as her primary overseer, and while the two men were vastly different, they shared one common trait: a need to control Claire's every move. Victor had a clear vision for Claire's future, one that didn't involve Kyle, but rather someone who could be controlled, a person who wouldn't challenge his authority. He believed that Kyle was unsuitable for Claire, and though he never said it directly, his actions made it clear that he had no intention of allowing her to form a lasting bond with someone who wasn't fully under his control. The tension between Kyle, Claire, and Victor was only just beginning to boil over, and Audra's role in manipulating Claire's perception of Kyle would undoubtedly add fuel to the fire. Claire's relationship with Victor would continue to deepen, but so would her confusion and conflicted feelings about Kyle. As Claire was pushed and pulled between these two powerful men, her journey toward understanding who she truly was, and who she could trust, would become increasingly complicated. Audra, meanwhile, had no intention of stopping. She was determined to see her plan through, regardless of the personal consequences. She was playing a dangerous game, one that could cost her everything if Nate discovered the truth about her involvement with Victor and Kyle. But in the high-stakes world of Genoa City, every decision had consequences, and as Audra walked the fine line between loyalty to Victor and her own moral compass, the fallout from her actions was bound to be explosive. As soon as Nate boarded his flight to Boston, leaving Genoa City behind for what he hoped would be a life-changing opportunity for Amy Lewis, Audra Charles knew that time was of the essence. Her mind raced, and as soon as the door closed behind Nate, she reached for her smartphone, her fingers hovering over the screen as she weighed her next move. She knew that while Nate was away, this was her moment to strike, to execute the final stages of the plan she had meticulously crafted under Victor Newman's watchful eye. With the clock ticking down, Audra understood that every second mattered, not just for her, but for the future of Abbott Communications, her connection to Victor, and the secrets she was keeping from those closest to her. The relationship between Nate, Audra, and Amy had evolved quickly and unexpectedly. Their shared commitment to helping Amy find peace with her past, and especially with Damian Kane, had created a bond that Audra didn't anticipate. Amy, who had been through so much, was looking for a fresh start, and her new treatment option in Boston offered her that chance. Nate, always the optimist, had rallied behind Amy's cause, offering support and hope for her future. Together, they pushed her to heal, both physically and emotionally, as she worked toward forgiveness, toward herself and others, particularly Damian, who was struggling to let go of past regrets. It was a beautiful sentiment, one that Audra, with her sharp instincts, recognized as her opportunity to manipulate. With Nate's encouraging message about Amy's cancer treatment in Boston, it seemed like the perfect time for Audra to advance her own agenda. She had long since been plotting her next move, and now that Nate was out of town and Amy was preoccupied with her health, Audra saw her opening. As much as she understood the importance of Nate's mission, she also saw it as her moment to strike, her chance to act without the scrutiny of his ever-watchful eyes. Nate's absence would give Audra the cover she needed to set her trap for Kyle Abbott, a move that could reshape the dynamics within Genoa City. If she could succeed in making Kyle lose Claire's trust, it would not only advance Victor's goals but also solidify Audra's position as an influential player in the corporate world. But as confident as Audra was in her plan, there were still dangerous elements at play. Holden Novak, a man Audra had thought she could handle, was becoming an increasingly unpredictable factor. She had thought she had him wrapped around her finger, a man who was drawn to her allure, believing that with enough patience, he would fall in line with her expectations. But Holden was more than just a pawn in her game, he was a wild card, someone who could ruin her plans if she didn't tread carefully. Holden was biding his time, hoping for a moment when Audra would realize that they had more in common than she cared to admit. He believed that if he waited long enough, Audra would come around, and he could potentially play a pivotal role in her future. But Audra was smart enough to know that Holden's patience could be a dangerous thing. The stakes of her plan were growing higher by the minute. Not only was she juggling the high-risk game with Kyle and Claire, but now Holden's involvement loomed large, and he seemed to be an unpredictable element that could derail everything she had worked toward. Holden's growing interest in her complicated the situation, and she found herself torn between managing his expectations and staying focused on her primary goal, Kyle Abbott's fall from grace. Audra's strategy had always been about balancing power and control. But with Holden hovering in the background, and the very real possibility that her plan with Kyle could backfire, Audra realized that she could lose everything. If her machinations were discovered, or if Victor found out she had mishandled the situation with Kyle or Holden, it could be the end of her career, and potentially her place within the Newman circle. Victor had made it clear that her success in this mission was crucial to his larger plans, and failure would have devastating consequences. Despite her confidence, Audra knew that the risks were escalating. She had already woven herself into a delicate web of lies and manipulation, and if anything went wrong, it could all unravel. Her promise to Victor was clear. Destroy Kyle's reputation in Claire's eyes, and ensure that Claire would not be a future threat. But to do so, she had to work with the fragile pieces of the puzzle that were in front of her: Nate's absence, Holden's unpredictable behavior, and Kyle's deep emotional ties to Claire. Every decision she made from this point forward could shift the balance of power in ways she couldn't fully predict. Meanwhile, Nate was deeply invested in Amy's treatment. He had seen the potential for her to survive and recover, and he was fully committed to ensuring she had the best chance at healing. But as he navigated his relationship with Amy in Boston, he was oblivious to the storm brewing in Genoa City, where Audra was slowly building the foundation for her own success. Nate trusted Audra, perhaps too much, but he had no idea just how deeply she was entangled in Victor's schemes. The nature of Audra's deception would have far-reaching consequences, especially when Nate eventually found out about her role in the trap set for Kyle. Victor Newman, as always, was the puppet master in this game. His plans for his family and business empire were never simple, and he had no problem using people as pawns to achieve his ultimate objectives. Audra knew this all too well. She was playing a dangerous game, but one she was convinced she could win. Yet, even with Victor's backing, the consequences of failure would be devastating. If she couldn't secure the success she promised, the trust she had built with Victor would crumble, and so too would her standing in Genoa City's cutthroat corporate world. Audra had always been ambitious, willing to take risks others wouldn't. But this time, the stakes were higher than ever. She wasn't just risking her career, she was risking everything. If she couldn't balance her ambitions with the growing dangers around her, she might just find herself losing the very thing she had worked so hard to gain: control. In the world of the young and the restless, control is everything, and Audra was walking a razor-thin line.